Welcome everybody to our Digital Services Biweekly Forum call. Today we're going to talk about the digital delivery standards and tooling and how they interact with CSDM. So I'm going to go ahead and see a couple of our other speakers coming in, just let them in. I'm going to go ahead and just go through the agenda. But before we do that, I want to take you through what the group is. For those of you that are on for the first time, if you can go ahead and just put a little comment in the chat where you're coming in from and what your role is so that we can welcome you to the group. That'd be great. The link on the bottom, I'm going to put this in the chat as well. This link will get you to everything that we have for the forum. So basically there's 4 main channels that we take care of. The first is this Zoom meeting that happens every other week, and we plan content together on here, and I'll share some of that at the end. There's also going to be the forum homepage where you can go get any presentations that we share, or sometimes even little code snippets will be out there. There's the YouTube playlist, which are these meetings that are recorded, plus a few other things here and there if we have a video that we're going to share on the playlist. And then there's a shared instance, and the shared instance, I've made some changes, so we'll talk about that. But basically, I have a new shared instance as of last week because the other one was getting a little bit beat up. So everybody in the group becomes an admin on that instance, so you can jump in and anything that we demo on it, you can pull down from it or kind of check out the configuration that we did. And so those are the 4 main things that you could use as being a member of the forum. Okay, so the reason we created this forum a while ago was because we were trying to figure out CMDB. And then what we did is we said later, all the stuff we're doing on CMDB, what is it actually for? And it was to support digital transformation. So our alignment now is on digital transformation, which gives us a little bit of a broader scope than just defining services inside the CMDB. So we want to enable our members to be part of those transformation teams. And we want to share work. So we're not doing, everybody's not doing the same thing over and over and over again. So as much as we can to bring that work in. We host this by the enterprise architecture team at ServiceNow. We host it, so there'll be different hosts. I'm one of the hosts out of the 4 of us. And we do try to stick to these bi-weekly meetings as our main source of getting information out to the forum. All right, today we're going to have Mark Bodman's going to start, and he has to drop off at 8:30 or 9 o'clock rather. So we'll split the first half with Mark, and then the second half, I think Mich and Celisa are both. Oh yeah, Celisa, I see you on there now. Hello. So Mich and Celisa will come in and talk about ITIL, and Mark's going to focus on the open group standards. And there's a lot of questions, and some of the content people are asking, like, how do I use this together with the CSDM, or where do they overlap? Where do they complement each other? So that's what we want to have the conversations on today. And then at the end, I'll take a little bit of time out the last few minutes, and I'll share some of the planning on the content that we've been doing. Now, today, this structure, I want to make a comment on. This is the perfect structure that we try to aim for. We don't always get there, but we like to have a ServiceNow piece for about 20 minutes of the meeting, and then a field piece, people actually doing the work in the field, customers like Mich and Celisa on the second part. So if we could do this every meeting, that'd be perfect, where I could have somebody presenting how they're actually using it in the field. All right, so with that, Mark, I think I'll hand it over to you, and then I'll switch back for content planning at the end. All right, Mark, my sensei, my yoga, my CSDM mentor.
Guru, I guess. Yeah.
Guru.
All right, let me jump in here, and I'm gonna start sharing. I don't have, like you said, I do have to drop on the hour, and so I'm gonna try to make this as I would say useful as you can without having to speed through it too much.
Sounds good.
So just give me a second. I'm adding one more thing to my presentation that I want to add that is kind of important, but kind of ancillary to the conversation. So I'll put that in backup, and I'll get to it if I can. All right. So, let's see. All right, I think this is the right presentation.
Okay.
Are you able to see everything?
Yep.
All right. So I brief a lot of folks on CSDM, and just to give you a little background on who I am, I started ServiceNow around 6 years ago to manage the app portfolio management product. And I guess I was in the room when we created CSDM, and now it's kind of my full-time job. And I'm also outbound product manager for CMDB. So all the CMDB stuff that comes and how that's evolving, and Service Graph connectors, I help out on that. I'm going to be talking about things in the future here. There's a lot of things that I work on which are way in advance of where the product set is, but there's a lot of synergies, and I'll point some of those out with the open group standards. And if you're not familiar with ServiceNow as a whole, hi, is there a question?
No, I think we just had somebody.
Okay. Yeah, so as you know, the CMDB Service Graph, you might have heard of that name before. Service Graph is really what I would call the extension of the CMDB into non-typical CIs. CIs have typically been the center of operations and understanding your as-is configuration of servers and software. As we kind of stretch that, we get into elements that aren't necessarily servers and software, things that are more conceptual in nature. Even the app service is logical. It's not really a physical thing. So the name Service Graph was created to kind of describe this broader model that we have. So it's not just connectors, it's just the concept of a broader model. And when I talk to folks about CMDB and I talk about their data foundation, I usually talk about three pillars: the ingestion of information from humans as well as from existing sources to get your as-is state. Insight, which is what's delivered from that as-is state when you're looking at a change, but it's also used in planning. And so if you do an M&A or you plan an upgrade or moving a data center or whatever, you got to have a good as-is state. So there's a lot of insight to be gained operationally also for planning. And then the last pillar is governance and health of the data that you use to make your decisions. And in there, we talk about CSDM as a way of structuring that data historically. Before I guess I came to the table and we created CSDM, we didn't have a guidance. We didn't have a framework that every customer used. Every customer chose their own framework, or made things up as they went, or they worked with a partner with their own framework. So that's kind of where CSDM sits. It's the way we think about governing the model, how we communicate, how we use it, and how we evolve it, really. So that's where CSDM fits in the scheme of things. And if you're not familiar with kind of how we look at it, we're communicating Service Graph kind of up here, communicating the digital products and services lifecycle is what we manage within our system. We've got products from the planning space, build space now with integrations with Jira and Lightstep and whatnot, all the way through operations and service delivery. And Service Graph is really that model that extends the CMDB. So you might have seen this diagram before, but there's something very interesting that I wanted to point out, because this has been in there for a while in our language, is the idea of digital products. And some of those products can be services. A product can be a good or a service. So in service is just an interaction. So through that interaction, it can be the product that you're selling, or it can be, of course, service for citizens, or a good, which is a physical item, which you have possession of. But in either way, they're products. You got to think about them like products. And this is starting to, I would say, permeate our thinking within the organization. And I'll give you some background on CSDM. And the CSDM was created originally because we had this problem of agreeing on language being used across these three key business units. I represented ITBM at the time. We had ITSM at the table and ITOM at the table. Of course, since then, it's grown into many other areas, other business units, but that's where CSDM was born. And we also created a number of what I call principles. Put my architect hat on for a moment. We made our decisions based on establishing a number of principles that we would adhere to. And having a simple model, simplifying the data model and the concepts in that model, we needed to be prescriptive about the model and agree on definitions, of course. And a lot of that model in CSDM is common and out of the box. This is kind of important too, because CSDM evolves based on the number of products that need to share or use the same information. Okay, so as we get into some of the open group standard stuff, you'll see why that's kind of important. We also wanted to focus on data governance and the processes around that. So a lot of our investments over the last few years have been to improve on that governance. And we have something called Policy as Code Engine. You'll see that embedded and coming out in products like DevOps Config and replacing other products that don't have what I would call a robust policy engine or governance engine. So there's a lot of stuff happening under the covers to kind of help with that governance pillar. But I wanted to start, from my own background. When I came aboard about 6 years ago, and I created app portfolio management, and the application portfolio was sort of my world. I came from a development and planning world, and I spoke in terms of applications that I develop and I deploy, or buy, configure, and deploy. Meanwhile, the rest of ServiceNow was really all around services, because that is where we came from. That's our roots, service management. And myself and David Thigpen worked together and said, you know what, our worlds are steadily coming together more and more so. What's happening here? In the middle is app service, just kind of a glom of the two words together. But what's happening here? And meanwhile, there was other practices coming out of the woodwork, such as Scrum practices, which you have product ownership. And we came up with a word called digital product to define what we're talking about holistically when we combine these two worlds into one. So this is an idea that we generated. We basically came up with this word. The first time I heard this was at a book publishing company where they had physical books, goods, and then they had digital books that they delivered as a service. So, and services around where you subscribe to that, right? You don't buy the good, you subscribe to digital books. So the word had been used before, but we really glommed onto this as a way to moving our thinking forward. Now that we're on the same platform, now that we're actually working together, what is the next generation going to look like? And what I wanted to point to is a product that we came out with last year called Digital Portfolio Management. And if you haven't seen this, it's the first time you can see these two worlds coming together. The app portfolio management, service portfolio management are still sort of separate, but they are converging on the platform. And products like Digital Portfolio Management came out of this idea of how does this world look like now when we bring them together. It is not quite product centric yet, but I'll get to that. So just hold with me. So the idea here is if you're using Digital Portfolio Management and you own both the application and the service, you're on a DevOps team, you can then define and see both from both perspectives. Okay, and the middle object, by the way, the application service, where they do come together. So now you can understand how your stuff is deployed, how it's being consumed, without having to bounce around the platform and find different workspaces or look at different stuff, which is more convenient for a product-centric view going forward. So keep that in mind. So let's talk a little bit about IT for IT version 3. So once we came up with this idea of digital product, I took it to the open group, where I've been part of the IT for IT forum for some years. And if you're not familiar with it, it's an open standard reference architecture framework that describes the end-to-end how IT works. And version 2 of the standard, it was centered on service. But once we came up with this idea of digital product, we went to the open group and we worked on a definition to take services and applications, bring it together and come up with this new concept and refactor this whole standard around this digital product concept. What does the world look like now centered on this new digital product where we can account for both the app and the service? Okay, so you can go to the forum, you can download the standard, but I'm going to take you through some of the key things. Of course, in CSDM, we're really focused on digital products and services throughout their life cycle. And so is IT for IT, and it's an agnostic framework that sits above the vendor implementations. Multiple vendors, ourselves, Micro Focus, consulting agencies, HCL, really hundreds of different companies and vendors kind of work together on defining this stuff. where CSDM obviously is really invented here for ServiceNow, but you're going to see a lot of synergies in the next few pages, and it's kind of important that I walk through this first. Of course, and the origins of CSDM was around 2018 when we started to work on this thing as a cross BU effort. By the way, CSDM was never intended for customers. We just wanted to get the product management team to agree on how to share data. We ended up going to customers simply because, well, Scott Lem took it out there and really evangelized it, and henceforth, you know, I'm here talking to you. It's become a bigger deal for customers than our own product units in some ways. So the idea here is that we started with this big picture view. When we have digital products at the center, we're thinking about product management now. We're thinking about managing the full life cycle of the goods and services that run code, basically, that are technical. And we have a larger ecosystem to worry about. Obviously, this is the IT for IT picture. We call it a value network. That's an ecosystem of different interactions that you have to deal with. And whatever digital product that you have, if it's a good or service or a combination of those, you got to think about this bigger picture and how that influences your decisions. Service providers, business partners, and all the way down to GRC, governance, risk, compliance issues. And so a lot of this is documented in the IT for IT standard in detail. But let's kind of look at the structure of IT for IT first and kind of get down to that detail. So we have what we call functional groups: plan, build, deliver, run. And you might have noticed when I showed you digital portfolio management, it does have these words as well. So we're thinking about the evolution of our product in these stages as well. So, you know, you plan things, you build them, and you deliver them, and you run them, and you continuously manage them, warranty them. We also have these value streams that cut across a lot of things. So the digital product is sort of the center, but as you look at the digital product and as it's sort of created, built, you've got to worry about the releases of those digital products. You have multiple releases being planned, worked on at any given time. We also incorporated the idea of service offering. And the idea here is that every product has some sort of warranty. It has a service component to it. We don't call it a service, obviously, because it could be a good with a service component to it. It could be a service, obviously, with a warranty, which is what we capture in the offering. Price, warranty, all of the things that go into that, commitments, all the things that you would expect. And then we have instances of digital product that we account for on the very far right here. And these are what we are managing and operating. If everything's in the data center and you just access your goods and services or your services through a web portal, then the instances are in your data center. But sometimes those instances are a combination of what's in your data center and a device your customer owns or has in their possession. And so what these product instances, what the actual instances that a customer owns, whether it be an internal consumer or an external customer or partner that depends on your goods and services, you got to be able to deal with that. We also wanted to incorporate and think about machine interactions because let's face it, their APIs are sort of a whole new economy out there. Everything's integrating with everything else. And even human interfaces, you can put a code on top of and mine and interact with human interfaces. That's a lot of what ChatGPT is. It just mines existing information through human interfaces and creates new human interfaces for you to consume. So we wanted to think about things in a much broader sense. And these 7 value streams are what we came up with. We extended the 4 that, if you're familiar with IT for IT, and previously we had 4 value streams: plan, build, deliver, run. But what we really saw is a lot of these value streams cut across these different areas. So you need to understand the product instance performance and customer feedback in order to evaluate where you're going to invest or divest. You can kill products that you're using or outsource them entirely. You explore the backlog of each product and you say, this is how much we're going to get done this year, next year, with each product release. And then you do continuous integration, continuous release and deployment. You can deploy, by the way, without having to release things to your public. You can make them ready and release when you want to. So you can have that ready and release maybe chunks of your customer base on new stuff. Not everybody needs to get it. We have the consumption value stream, which is how people acquire and interact with you. And then there's the operate, which is the break fix, detect to correct, as we used to call it. So there's some changes in the IT for IT structures to be able to accommodate, but I would say other frameworks that you might be familiar with out there, like such as DevOps pipelines, CI/CD, or there's a bit of safe thinking involved here. So in IT for IT, I wanted to cover this because this is the major influencer for CSDM at least. And we defined what a digital product instance is, and I wanted to point out a few things. So there's a paper on this. We can provide links to that. But as we defined it, we said there's a contract, which is, think about that as the offering. There's the interaction methods, which are the way I get to it. URL entry point for somebody that's actually savvy at that level of the architecture, or an API, for example, for machine interfaces. Underneath that, you have systems, which comprise of code, compute, devices, things like that, assets. So this is the decomposition of each of those instances into what do they contain? What are they? But they also depend on each other. So each instance may depend on other instances through APIs, interactions, and whatnot. And there's a lot of shared stuff. There's shared CI/CD pipelines. There's shared teams that might, be assigned to various digital products. This is a little bit conceptual, but I wanted to kind of point this out for a few reasons and just take note of this word systems. We currently have in our model something called application service. I don't know about you. I always had a problem trying to understand what that was and use it in my world. And I've talked to a lot of customers. They have a lot of issues with being able to understand that. System is a better way of describing that application service. And when you look at the CSDM definitions, that's what we're now using as a way of defining what an app service is. Think about it as a system that comprises of things, which is what service mapping kind of does. And then you've got interactions between other systems. So there you got dependencies and maybe a system structure. System contains systems, or system can be built on top of other systems like a platform. So this system nomenclature is a little easier to understand and something we're looking at going forward. This is the full, I would say, functional architecture for IT for IT. And a couple things I wanted to point out here. You'll recognize many things in here in terms of what we do already. Things like source portfolio backlog. We kind of do that in the PPM space. We look at enterprise architecture. We have a new EA portal that just came out. We have monitoring and event management, configuration and management. We deal with usage tracking through our catalog. So there's a lot of things that map to what we do, but it may not be obvious. But when you start looking at the definitions for these things, you'll say, oh, that equates to this or these products that work together to do that kind of thing. Things like knowledge are very obvious. Now, what I wanted to kind of show you is this does map to CSDM in many different ways. And today, if you think about CSDM version 4, a lot of these, when you think about the digital product instance, we've introduced this idea of product model in CSDM to be able to capture what are we talking about? What is the product? What is the version of that product that we're creating and managing? Today, that's used typically in SAM and HAM for describing hardware and software, but we're going to broaden that to these other areas. And of course, we have the technical services, business services, and then business applications that can be now munched together to describe these instances, right, at a more abstract level. But of course, CSDM is still scattered. We still have all these different definitions to tie together. DPM kind of helps bring it together, but it's still not tightly bound, if you will. And then the interaction methods are really how we describe the offerings and how we interact with our customers. And then systems equates to app services, which that's what I just pointed out. And then, and when we think about organizing these digital products, we kind of broke this down into the following areas, these following portfolios. Some of these digital products are there to manage other digital products like ServiceNow. That's why you buy ServiceNow. You buy it to help create and manage the products you provide to your customers, products or services for that matter. And then we've got the shared foundational stuff, like the technology services kind of covers that. The stuff used by employees is your classic business service. Those are your people internally that use your stuff. And then you've got product lines sold to customers that are outside. So we have different ways of organizing these and different entities in our model to capture this kind of information. And sold products, by the way, if you're not familiar with that, that is part of our customer service management portfolio. And where we're going with that is we're going to be incorporating some of that into our CSDM, because more and more customers just need that visibility. Even if they don't buy your CSM yet initially, they still need to know who is the end customer or that's impacted when something fails. And there's a lot of course, interdependencies between all of these. And so part of the way that the IT for IT is structured is to be able to facilitate this. Part of what we already have in the CSDM with app services, depending on each other, for example, is already there for to a so large degree. And I'm going to skip past this one right now, but just one quick word. Product utilization in IT is all over the place. You've got different ways of thinking about products. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to bring them together into a common definition. So the products you sell, buy, internally deliver to each other, those are all covered by this definition. So something to keep in mind. And we do have what I call a digital product maturity model that we put together to think about things in this way. And you'll notice that there's digital product concepts, but there's also CSDM concepts that align along the way. This is structured very similar to what you see in crawl, walk, run, fly, if you're familiar with CSDM. But we're taking these layers on top to understand what's the digital product concepts that we're talking about here, if you're already adhering to IT for IT and some of the things we've defined there. And the other thing that, I'm gonna skip that one real quick. This is better. We've incorporated this digital product definition and how we're moving forward with product models. So product models are already in the system, and over the next year or so, you're going to see a shift and focus on product models being created, and then everything else being related to those. It's part of CSDM down here, and we've kind of adopted this definition from an IT for IT perspective to drive forward our thinking in CSDM in these areas. And I have to apologize. I'm not going to get to everything I wanted to, but I'm almost there. I know it's very fast, but you can go or listen to the recording. I wanted to cover everything. This is our vision for the future when we do adopt a lot of these IT for IT concepts, in mass across all of IT for IT. And just a couple things I wanted to point out. We're adding value stream, and we're likely going to release a 4.1 CSDM before we release version 5 or whenever we come with next. But value streams is also added in IT for IT. If you go back to that in the recording, you'll see value streams as part of the definition. So we're keeping in sync with some of the incremental things. We're also keeping in sync with some of these things like digital product being used everywhere, because a lot of times it's a good and a service that's coupled. How do we capture that? We want to capture that in all contexts, including from the design point of view all the way delivery. And we also want to understand your consumers internally, but also who do you sell your products to, and what are those dependencies on your technology? Where is code running in that product or in your data center that customers actually depend on? So we're broadening the definition of CSDM to kind of incorporate these definitions, but also map what we're doing in the products we sell to these definitions wherever possible. And you'll notice that we have also thought about these folks as product owners, and these digital products are going to take on a much bigger aspect of how we manage things, like I said before. Everything else describes how it's used. It's used internally or by a consumer, or externally or internally. So I do have to stop sharing here. I do have a hard cutoff, and I really can't be too late to that. There were some questions in the chat.
I think I got most of them. When's the CSDM going to be the CPDM?
We'll see. I'm evangelizing that through my work. So is Scott Lem, if you've ever met him. It is going to take a while to evolve our thinking, but we're on a path, and I wanted to see, we're laying some of the foundational elements of that path now. So we're going to get there.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Mark. I appreciate you jumping on.
Thank you. Sorry for the blitz. All right.
All right. Hey, Mitch and Celisa, you guys there?
Hello.
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 Thanks for taking this part. Look forward to getting caught up on ITIL. I've been on the open group boat so long. I'm looking forward to getting back and seeing what's going on the ITIL side.
Well, I think many of us are concerned about the perceived diminished value of services, right? Being removed from, future iterations and kind of where that's going to land, because many of our organizations are service focused and we really haven't embraced kind of the product management, the ability to create product teams and use those sort of product management methodologies and product ownership to manage digital products, right, in the form of services and products. So
versus projects.
Well, versus product versus managing services, like, defining everything as a service, and then products and service offerings support those services.
Yeah. And I think a lot of what, like when the Mark and Scott talk, they say that going through the early stages, like the plan and the build, is a real focus on the product. But then once you get out into the run, then it becomes services that you're actually delivering. So the services in the operational state are still the primary thing that will be exposed. But for all the planning and the building purposes, the product becomes a main part of it.
Yeah, I would say that we still think that's flipped, that the products become part of that build stage in the strategy. You're developing your services to support the definition of your services to support those business capabilities. So,
okay. Cool.
Lisa, do you have any thoughts before I jump into my part?
No, I agree completely. I think often we, in terms of ServiceNow customers, conflate the term service as defined within ITIL with a support activity or a function, which really diminishes the meaning and value of the original concept of what a service is and the persistent, sustaining nature of services across time and across institutions that allow us to communicate and collaborate on shared business capabilities we all require. Mm-hmm. Whereas in the ITIL world, and particularly in the world that Mitch and I live in higher education, products are transient. Products come and go over time, whereas services are constant over time because they're linked to foundational business capabilities that are needed to complete our mission work.
Right.
So I think I find the movement towards products, which are kind of ephemeral, flash in the pan things, and away from the services we deliver to align with our business capabilities, to be concerning.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I don't think the services are going away. I think the services, the point is to get the focus on that's what's being delivered. Like that's the byproduct of the product. So it's still, we're not going to be delivering products instead of services. We're still going to be delivering services. It's using the product structure as a means to get there now.
Yeah, and that's fair, John. So like, the products that most of us in higher ed and the ITIL world think of are those, how Mark mentioned the three different types of products, right? So traditionally, products have been thought of the same as service offerings, which have been like that thing that you buy or build, right? But, to Mark's point, the product is, in an ITIL defines a product as a collection of and configuration of organizational resources designed to offer value for a customer. So it may be how your teams are structured and what tools they use from like the 4 dimensions, right? What information do they use? What tools do they use? How are they set up to support the service in a sort of a product model? Mm-hmm. So I, kind of step back. I know you wanted to kind of have us talk a little bit about ITIL and maybe where the CSDM lands, whether it's conflicts with ITIL or not. And I'll start a little, and then I'll let Celisa, you can just jump in with your thoughts too. But kind of so the ITIL always been like not prescriptive, right? So I think I just want to say that I think CSDM is really sort of an answer to a very old question on how to structure and create CI relationships. So we in the IT world have often struggled with, okay, yes, we know that a CMDB is important. We know that we're supposed to create relationships between our CIs, and we know we're supposed to define them and put them in a database and have that information accessible to the people that need that information and will use that information. But how do we do that? And ITIL is purposely steered away from any sort of prescriptive guidance. And so you've got other frameworks like Boshi and TBM and a few others out there that have been more industry specific, but for us specifically in ServiceNow customers, this has really been an answer that we've been looking for. And so, it's not at odds because it's a data model to help us to structure our CMDB. And as an ITIL practitioner and someone that, manages, SACM, or now in ITIL 4 is just service configuration management. This is important as I build out my CMDB and I start to define how the services are connected. And for us, we define all of that in our service catalog. As we define a service, we write down who is the service owner, how is this thing supported, what are the support hours, all those attributes, what are things that make up that service. ITIL used to call them service components, but now we've got very specific language about the different types of CIs and a structure to create those relationships. So, we could use like a mapping and a discovery to help us accelerate that sort of visual representation and mapping. But even if we don't have the money to spend on discovery or mapping, we have some sort of way now, even if it's manually, to create a Visio or that tool Inspire to create those relationships, right? Yep. So I think what I'll do is just for time, I'll talk a little bit about in an ITIL world how there's kind of the relationship between ITIL and IT for IT. Both of them use sort of a service value chain. Right. So where IT for IT, there's sort of that linear path from what strategy to portfolio to what do they call it in the old world? Strategy to portfolio, requirement to deploy, right? Request to fulfill, detect to correct. Sort of that linear fashion. And in version 3, they would call it the service life cycle. But now in 4, it's more of a non-linear path of getting from demand to value, right? So it's that value stream concept the value chain concept that's apparent in IT for IT as well as in ITIL. And what I wanted to do is walk through, I have one slide, so I only had time to prepare for one slide, but I wanted to walk you through an example of how we as ITSM practitioners would use the CSDM and the CMDB to do a value stream. So if I have, maybe I have sharing here, yeah. So for an example, a value stream can be any activity and set of activities to deliver some sort of value at the end. So I used a very simple example of ordering a laptop. And by the way, if any of you were at a recent webinar, you'll probably recognize this as a slide from one of the webinars. So the value stream example is ordering a new laptop, right? So when we order a laptop, it may come in through the catalog. Somebody may go to catalog, select the model they want, the configuration they want, the software they have to want installed, right? So the user comes in, demands a laptop. Then the portal can act as the engagement point, or it could be calling the service desk to ask us as a service desk agent to place an order for a laptop. So that's really kind of in the engage where, okay, yeah, you're a valid user, you have the right to order this. Do we need to send off permission to your manager to allow you to get this laptop? No or yes, right? And then it kind of moves through the chain into sort of a plan. Okay, well, now we have to figure out, do we have a laptop that he wants? Do we have a configuration that we want, right? And then in sort of that design and transition, this is where the CMDB and asset registry play into account, right? Because then they've got to pull the hardware asset from inventory, right? It might have a product model, right? It's a Lenovo, blah, 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 right? And then you've got to remove that from your inventory. You've got to make sure that the attributes for that asset record are correct. It's the right user. It's the right configuration. And maybe even that asset is a configuration item because maybe it supports a critical database that supports a business application. Well, that information is known by modeling that out in the CSDM, right? And then you've identified those attributes, and they're now in your CMDB, right? So then it moves from design and transition to a delivery and support. The customer gets the laptop, make sure everything's installed on it. There may be sort of back to an engagement, number 7, where it's like, are you happy with the laptop? Did you get what you want? Is it working? And then, closing out using that product, right? The product of the laptop in this case, and us as a configuration resources that configure the laptop, right? And part of that offering may be a special VIP warranty, right? You get extra support hours, you get, you get a special phone number. And then, of course, in the end, value is realized.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one example how we would use that CSDM structure and even the foundational data that's part of the CSDM4 to support where is the user located, what's their name, what's their title, right? And then the information about that person.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yep. So in the end, number 8, you can be delivering a product like a laptop, or you can be delivering a service like employee onboarding.
Yeah, and desktop services. Maybe somebody's going to come out and install a special piece of software on your laptop.
Yeah.
Right. Software installation. Right. Yep.
Yeah, I think the big difference here is, maybe that I think you guys were alluding to in the beginning, right? Is that product, like the demand would feed into a product, and then the product may be delivered at the end, or the product might kind of be left in the plan phase or the build phase, and then the services are what comes out as in the end. Like,
well,
I think
actually,
in higher ed and government, it's all services.
So John, you're actually using an existing product or service to deliver value. So you're using those configuration of resources like your desktop support services that actually go out and configure the laptop. They install BigFix on it, all their checklists to make sure that this laptop is ready to be provisioned and used by the customer, right? Which could include a service, because it could just be a good, right? Where we just deliver a laptop and you're done, like a cell phone, right?
Yeah.
So.
Yep. Cool. Or it could be the whole service of providing ongoing support for the laptop with it, right? So it's a package.
And that would be a different value stream. Would be like if you had your laptop was broken, it'd be repair laptop or that kind of thing, right? And you take a different path through the value stream, or through the value chain to create that unique value stream.
Yeah, it's interesting. So it's very similar to what they're doing. I mean, with the 7 value streams in IT for IT, but it's there's subtle differences, I guess, in how they say it. But I know the ITIL and the IT for IT people talk. And they, but a lot of times when they overlay it, they push ITIL more towards the operational phases, and then they look at like Agile and PMBOK in the earlier stages to kind of plug into that.
Yeah, the thing that people maybe not realize is ITIL is just a set of frameworks and best practices, so it's very inclusive of other standards and practices and frameworks, so like the DevOps community, DevOps versus ITIL, right? The big raging battle. It's not about that. It's just a way for us to adapt and adopt a way of implementing ITSM, right? So, it's using these 4 dimensions of people and organizations, how our organization is structured, skill sets people have, what are the value streams and processes, right? So from step A to step Z, what happens like when an incident is being reported, right? It's using information and technology like databases and tools like BigFix and Scrum and, Agile 2.0. It's using partners and suppliers too, like ServiceNow, to help us stand up a practice, right? So.
To me, that seems like one of the differences too. Like IT for IT tells you what you need to do, but not how to do it.
Same as ITIL.
I think ITIL is a little more prescriptive on how to do things, though.
Well, I think that's the stigma, right? And that's the bad rap that ITIL v3. Don't get me started. That's the bad rap that ITIL v3 got started. In fact, there was a funny story that the authors were in a pub in England, and someone said, "Oh, here's a process map of how to do incidents. Step 1, detect an incident. Step 2, log it. Step 3, classify it. The whole steps, right?" And someone said, "No, this is just an example." And then they got into a fist fight over it. They were at a pub, so that's probably appropriate, but it was meant to be just as an example. So the prescription thing is kind of a bad rap. CAB is another great example. No one said in ITIL v3 that you must have one single CAB to rule them all.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Okay, cool.
I talked a lot. Any thoughts there, Celisa?
Yeah, I have a few things I can share that might be helpful to the larger group. In our last few moments here, John, is it okay if I share a few slides?
Yeah, definitely. You have sharing rights, right?
Let's see.
There you go. Yep, I see it.
Okay, great. So I'm going to go super fast like John did here. And don't worry, those of you who look down and are like, oh my God, she has 108 slides. I keep one master deck rather than searching for the right presentation. So some of the things that Mich was saying a moment ago are really important. ITSM is a practice and it's guided by frameworks. ITIL is one framework, but not the only one. And ITIL in particular shines a lens on the service element of what we do. And services are how we align to those fundamental business capabilities. Tools like ServiceNow are fantastic force multipliers that help us use our framework to accomplish our objective. And I think fundamentally, we all want to get to the same place, right? We want to transition. We want to transform, is the current language, from a traditional IT view to a service-oriented IT view. Traditional IT, if we think about it, and I've been working in IT for almost 30 years now, is very focused on the technologies, the specific products. We find ourselves fighting fires. You mentioned incidents, John. We're very reactive. We tend to be centralized. We often denigrate our users, right? And don't think about them as really the source of demand that we serve. We do things in a one-off way. It can be very informal at times. And I've often seen IT treated like a strategic hobby, right? This is something we do because we like it, not because we're here to deliver mission essential services to support the university or our local government or our healthcare organization so that they can be better at accomplishing our mission work. By moving from a technology or product focus to a service focus, we can over time mature from those experiences to ones that are more proactive, where we think about our consumers and our customers, where our practices are repeatable and where we align with our mission. The big transformative element here is in moving from this traditional product-driven view to the service view. And I think this aligns nicely with the notion of systems, right? When we started with CMDB, when we start in traditional IT, we make a lot of lists, don't we? Don't we love to make our lists? We make a list of our servers. We make a list of our applications. We make a list of our VLANs. But these lists in and of themselves don't really deliver value, right? It may be a necessary meta step or a zero step to get us off the ground because you can't manage what you don't know you have. But it's not those lists of individual assets or items that are really transformative if we're trying to get from left to right here. The transformation comes in thinking about these items not as individual components that share an attribute or a manufacturer or a data center, but thinking about how they join together with people, process, technology, and partners to deliver a single service. And it's this mapping of a system, right? A system that comprises the people, the practices, and all those technologies, whether they're at the network layer or at the server layer or the middleware layer, to come together and align with a capability that's needed. That's why we see so much language overlap between the ITIL concept of service and ServiceNow's concept or TOGAF's concept of capability, right? We often see those two pieces of language, and I'll pop over here. See how there's this line connecting business capability to business service around, this is old, I know this is 3.0, and you guys are looking at 5, but this line is really important and I hope it doesn't get lost. When we think about business capability and business service, we often linguistically express these as two sides of the same coin, where a business capability might be, it is imperative that we manage our finances, right? Manage finances. The verb comes first, right? Manage finances, enroll students, preserve campus safety, The verb comes first when articulating business capabilities. Oftentimes, business services just flip the words. We go from the business capability of manage finances to the business service of financial management. We go from the business capability of manage student information to the business service of student information management, which is then delivered through a product like PeopleSoft Campus, or Banner, or SAP, or put your favorite product, right, into that slot. And in fact, at NAU, in our instances, we have actually replaced the term service offering with product already, live and in production. So I think that notion that it's the network or the larger system that gives us the value and aligns service to capability is pretty consistent. I think sometimes we have a disconnect around things services are not. Mm-hmm. Services are not applications. Services are not pieces of hardware. Services are not activities or tasks we do. Or acts we perform, and certainly not HR teams. My slide is less pretty than Mark's, but we do consider that services include everything that surrounds that technology, right? It's not just the product that we're delivering. It's how we fulfill it, how we support it, the training, the documentation, our security profile, our communication strategy, how we measure our success. We can give down, we can dig down, we can give examples. The product is certainly valuable, but it's not the be all end all. Mich is right. We do think of everything in terms of our portfolio and our catalog. This is a really important concept to us within ITIL. And it's not just how we offer it, it's how we maintain that institutional knowledge of everything we have yet to do and everything we've already retired. This lets us really get down into the nuts and bolts of managing our services, not just managing our applications, not just managing our products, but managing our services from the perspective of their adoption rate, their incident rate, their reliability, their trend lines in growth or retirement, the total cost of ownership, and how we manage that across any particular service life cycle. Which is why in ServiceNow, we look for the places to store the meta information that we need to track in order to manage services well. In our service definition or dialogue process, there's certain information we need as we select the product or products which will deliver that service. We also need to keep track of information about those products. And then the very operational elements concerned with delivery, and finally, continuity and reliability. So let me pause there because I do go on.
Let me see if I have any questions for you.
Yeah.
If anybody has any questions, if you could put them in the chat, I'll bring them up to Celisa and Mich.
I know I was going super fast.
Yeah, I know. We all got a lot of material.
But I will say, this is something we're continually tuning. Mm-hmm. It's here. These were my speaker's notes. You can all see them, or I can stop sharing my screen here. Northern Arizona University has licensed and implemented IT Service Management Pro, IT Operations Management, Service Mapping and Discovery, IT Business Management, Project and Portfolio Management, and APM and SAM. We don't yet have HAM. I think probably the tough part for us right now is the siloed data within ServiceNow. How do we synchronize and keep logical consistency between who's the service owner as it's recorded in APM and as it's recorded in the service record and as it's recorded in the service offering record, when all of those are different tables and can disagree? How do we keep business criticality consistent when we're referring to the same logical conceptual item in 3 different modules, but it's recorded in 3 different tables. And in fact, with different drop-down options. APM gives 3 criticality levels, ITSM gives 4 criticality levels. And do we really want those to disagree when they inform day-to-day practices around change, incident, and problem? So we're looking at exception reports and manual reconciliation. We've looked at some business logic, but then we just get into overwrite wars, right? If I disagree with your criticality, then I can overwrite your data.
Yeah.
So we're still trying to figure out that sweet spot of how to best leverage this investment we've made in ITSM, ITOM, ITBM, APM, and SAM. And I'm curious if anyone wants to share in the chat or reach out to me afterwards, how many other people on this call are simultaneously using these different modules? Because I would love to have a community of practice about the intersection between ITSM, ITOM, ITBM, APM, and SAM. Ham will probably in our will be on our roadmap at our next renewal, which is still about 14 months off, but we're not fully done implementing APM yet, so it's good to have a little time.
Yeah, I saw this on during a meeting the other day, right? That all that you're dealing with, trying to sort out all these things. So these are all the tools in the tool chain that can be used for looking at these things we're talking about. And it gets really daunting, right? To try to figure all that out and all the people doing it. So where you get down to your actual hardware and software management, I think that's a lot of that would be grouped in where self-service, there's all the service. They don't even have Ham and Sam in here, but that's kind of another aspect of it. It might be in service management. They might have it grouped in there, but it's interesting, all the different pieces of things that we're trying to put together in order to support that service delivery chain, right? Well, let me take a few minutes. I know we only got, I want to solicit some feedback here. So over the last few meetings, I have these things in our, like when we talk about content, we get together. I'm still kicking these around. Thanks today for covering the standards. That was a big thing that came up a few weeks ago, so I took that off here. But digital product and the future of CSDM, we talked a little bit about that today, but we can certainly cover more on that. We APM has been there's been a lot of work going on around APM, especially with the new enterprise architecture dashboard. More complex use cases, CSDM. We did that in CSDM implementers part 1 and part 2. We might want to do a part 3 because it looks like there's still more people interested in CSDM modeling here. And then, with Tina as well down here, data models showing examples. So we will make sure we get that loop back in. Now for the next few meetings, and if you guys, just like these little comments here that Matt and Gerald and Tina put out there, if you guys can throw that in the chat, let me know what you want. Well, make sure that you're considered when we're talking about how to pull this content together. And as you do that, I want to give you some ideas of what we did when we take what you give us, the feedback you give us, either sending emails to Jason or Rachel or Charles or myself, and also in the chats. But this is kind of what we start shaping it. So the value stream management, even though it doesn't seem like it, it does tie back to this SPM. Because that's a new part of SPM and a little bit about what Mark talked about today. So there's been a lot of interest in value streams and what that is. So in 2 weeks from now, we're going to cover that in depth. And I know today Mich touched on value streams and so did Mark a little bit. So that's going to be an up and coming area. I think a lot of people need to focus on in order to make sure they optimize that value delivery. Business capability planning and mapping. This is one that was in that group of comments. We're all developing reference architectures for industries so ServiceNow will have an opinion. So for government, which includes higher education and healthcare and everything in government, there's a standard that I'm going by for basically business capabilities, and it's by the enterprise or the Business Architecture Guild. They have a standard that they put out for capabilities, value streams, reference, mapping the organization. And then one thing I've been kicking this around, I'm looking for some help on this, but we're people ask, does ServiceNow have a business rules engine? And it's really interesting when they ask that, because some people are asking about the front end. Do I have business rules on the form, or I can ask people for more or less depending on what they check? But then there's the workflows and the business rules, everything that happens once the record gets in there. And then there's things that happen on the human side. So playbooks we have playbooks and guided decisions right on the agent. So there's all these different rules engines in there that kind of work together to make it up. And then there's some people think of more traditional rules engines, like, I'm going to go down this list and apply these things. But I'm trying to see, how do we kind of get our arms around that and say, look, these are all the ways that you can process rules in ServiceNow. So those are the upcoming content areas. And like I said, as much as you can put in there, things you want to see, things you're tripping on, if you can just drop them in the chat, that'd be great. All right, and I'm over. So thanks to our speakers, Mich and Celisa. I know I jammed you guys last minute, so thanks so much for putting together what you did. I think it was super valuable. And
it's always fun. Thanks for asking us to do this, John.
Good deal. Good deal. Thanks again.
Always happy to help.
All right. Thank you. Always good stuff. I learned a lot from you guys. So we'll talk to you all in 2 weeks. Thanks, everybody.
All right. Bye.